Welcome back. Today we're looking at Candide, chapters 13 through 18, where Candide and his friends arrive in the New World, and we reach the turning point of the book. So when we last left our heroes, they were on a boat on the way to the New World, and the old woman was telling them her story. Chapter 13 opens with Candide and Cunegonde following up on the old woman's suggestion that they talk to each person on this boat to see if he or she really does think he or she is the most miserable of all people. And it turns out that the old woman is so right that Candide wonders how Pangloss would have taken it. But before long they arrive in Buenos Aires, and there they meet the governor of that good city, who is Don Fernando de Barra y Figueroa y Mascarenes y Lupuardos y Souza. Sorry about that. As soon as he meets them, the governor begins to make eyes at the lovely Cunegonde. Hey, baby. And Candide doesn't lie and say that she is his wife or his sister or anything like that, because he's too honest and good of a man. But he does say that he's betrothed to her. The governor sends Candide out of the room and begins to profess his love for Cunegonde and say that he wants to marry her. And she says, "Give me 15 minutes to think about it." She talks it over with the old woman. The old woman is very practical and says, well, that's a good way to get a good fortune. But before Cunegonde can say yes, in comes a fleet following Candide and trying to find the man who murdered the Grand Inquisitor and Don Issachar. Candide is forced to flee, leaving Cunegonde behind. He's lost her again. What will he do without her? Chapter 14 opens with Candide and his valet Cacambo running away. They don't know where to go, but Cacambo suggests that instead of going and fighting the Jesuits, as they originally planned, they can go join the Jesuits. Cacambo is a loyal and intelligent valet who's retrospectively written into the story. He's apparently been with them since Cadiz. Upon arriving at the Jesuit camp, they are at first treated a bit coldly, until Cacambo reveals that Candide is actually a German, and then he is welcomed in. There he's ushered into the presence of the Reverend Father Commander, who just so happens to be Cunegonde's brother! He survived the horrible events of the massacre at Tundra as well. And here he is, alive and well, and so happy to see Candide again. The two embrace and celebrate their reunion. He's also very excited to find out that his sister is still alive as well, until Candide says, yes, and we're going to be married. Cunegonde's brother insults Candide and says he's not good enough for his sister, and Candide, in a fit, stabs him and kills him. Oops. So good to see you again. I'm gonna marry your sister.
No, you're not.
Sure! Alas, dear God, said he, I have killed my old master, my friend, my brother-in-law. I am the best man in the world, and here are 3 men I've killed already, and 2 of the 3 were priests. Fortunately, the clear-headed Cacambo takes the Jesuit robe away from Cunegonde's brother and puts it on Candide, so he's disguised, and the 2 of them flee, this time into the wilderness. Candide is despondent and wonders how he can ever face Cunegonde again, when all of a sudden he sees 2 naked women being chased by monkeys. And he thinks, here's an act of heroism I can do to help pay for my crimes, and so he whips out his musket and kills the 2 monkeys. However, this turns out to be a mistake, because these monkeys are actually the young women's lovers. Apparently such goings-on are okay in the New World. Cacambo and Candide settle for the night, but they're awakened tied up by the Oreillons, the local natives who want to eat them. They are excited to have captured a Jesuit. Although Candide is very frightened, Cacambo is able to speak their language and is able to talk to them. Candide reminds him to tell them that it's not right to eat people. Christian ethics forbid it. But instead, Cacambo says, you know, it's perfectly right to eat your enemies, but we're not your enemies. You think you're about to eat a Jesuit, but he's not a Jesuit. He just murdered a Jesuit, and that's why he's wearing his robe. They found this discourse perfectly reasonable. They appointed chiefs to go post-haste and find out the truth. The 2 messengers performed their task like men of sense, and quickly returned bringing good news. They untied their 2 prisoners, treated them with great politeness, offered them girls, gave them refreshments, and led them back to the border of their state, crying joyously, he isn't a Jesuit! He isn't a Jesuit! Cacambo suggests they return to Europe because the New World is no better than the Old. But on their way, sailing down the river, they accidentally go down a very terrible passage. They get caught in some rapids and sucked through a cavernous trail where their canoes are smashed and they have to climb carefully along the rocks until finally they discover themselves in a very strange land. They've reached the country of Eldorado, the land of gold. There they find some children who appear to be playing a game with some stones. As they look at the stones, they realize that these are incredibly valuable gemstones. Candide takes them for children of a king, but when their schoolmaster calls them back into school, the children leave these stones on the ground. Candide and Cacambo try to return them, but the schoolmaster laughs and tosses them back on the ground. Cacambo quickly discovers that he is able to speak their language, and he interprets for Candide throughout the next couple of chapters. The people of this land invite Candide and Cacambo in and give them wonderful, amazing meals, all the time apologizing that they can't do better. They find that everyone here is generous and has everything he or she could possibly want. What is this country then, said they to one another, unknown to the rest of the world, where nature itself is so different from our own? This probably is the country where everything is for the best, for it's absolutely necessary that such a country should exist somewhere. And whatever Master Pangloss said of the matter, I often had occasion to notice things went pretty badly in Westphalia. In chapter 18, Candide and Cacambo are introduced to an old man who knows a bit more. He explains to them the customs of Eldorado, including the customs of religion. It turns out that they don't have a religious hierarchy like the Catholics do. And although they all believe in a god, they don't feel any need to pray to him because they really have everything they could possibly want. They just give thanks every morning. Candide is flabbergasted. What? You have no monks to teach, argue, govern, intrigue, and burn at the stake everyone who disagrees with them? We should have to be mad, said the old man. Here, we are all of the same mind, and we don't understand what you're up to with your monks. After that, Candide and Cacambo are taken before the king. Candide asks what's the appropriate way to greet the king. Should I grovel on the ground? Should I lick the dust? Should I hold onto my rear end? And they say no, you just go up and you give him a kiss on the cheek. And so they stay about a month in Eldorado, and everything is perfect. They have everything they could possibly want. They have everything they could possibly need. Everyone is so happy. They've finally found the best of all possible worlds. And yet Candide keeps saying, you know, I really think we should be leaving. Candide never tired of saying to Cacambo, it's true, my friend, and I'll say it again, the castle where I was born does not compare with the land that we are now, but Miss Cunegonde is not here, and you doubtless have a mistress somewhere in Europe. If we stay here, we shall be just like everybody else. Whereas if we go back to our own world, taking with us just a dozen sheep loaded with Eldorado pebbles, we shall be richer than all the kings put together. We shall have no more inquisitors to fear, and we shall easily be able to retake Miss Cunegonde. And so Cacambo and Candide go before the king and ask to be able to leave his kingdom. Now, no one has been able to leave his kingdom for many, many, many years. It's the isolation that keeps this such an idyllic world. But he agrees to have a huge machine built that lifts them out over the mountains that block the way out of Eldorado. Cacambo and Candide ask for a few sheep and to be able to take some of the mud and pebbles, which are made of gold and precious gems. The king laughs at them, but allows them to take 100 red sheep, covered with all the gold and jewels they could possibly carry. And so they're lifted up over the mountains, out of Eldorado, and back into the world. Now that they're the two richest people in the entire earth, surely they can find Miss Cunegonde and everything can work out for the best. Right? We'll find out next time. Characters! So we re-see several of our characters that we've already explored in previous sections. Candide, of course, is quite the same. He's so sweet and innocent and still murdering people left and right. The old woman, who is very clever, is much more practical than romantic, and she's willing to advise Cunegonde to marry the governor of Buenos Aires instead of her true love, Candide. Cunegonde, as we see, is becoming less and less ideal by the moment. She's pretty quick to ditch her boyfriend and true love for the fancy guy with the mustache and all the money. Ho ho ho. We also pick back up with Cunegonde's brother, who serves as a serious obstacle for Candide in his quest for Cunegonde. Not only does he refuse to let Candide marry her, but then also, after Candide kills him, that kind of puts a damper on their relationship. There are plenty of old heroic stories where the hero kills a close relative of the girl he loves and has that horrible inner conflict. Think Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo kills Tybalt, is a pretty common premise for a story, but notice the comedy with which it's played here. Finally, we have Cacambo, who is a loyal and clear-headed valet. Although he is very loyal and very practical, somewhat like the old woman, he also seems to stand on almost even footing with Candide at times. Notice how when they're in Eldorado, because Cacambo can talk to everyone and Candide cannot, he becomes kind of the master. At the beginning of chapter 18, it says, "Thereupon he brought Cacambo to the old man's house. Candide now played second fiddle and acted as the servant to his own valet. Candide shares motivation with Cacambo in leaving Eldorado. Candide shares his wealth with Cacambo. Cacambo seems to be more of an equal and a friend than just a valet. Also, Cacambo is ridiculously useful because he apparently can speak every language ever. Everywhere they go, he's like, oh yeah, I know this sort of pseudo version of this from Peru. And he apparently speaks all these imaginary languages as well. In these chapters, we see a transition point in the book. We're halfway through now. In the first half of the book, Candide experienced all kinds of physical distress. He and his friends were horribly beaten, horribly abused, horribly torn apart over and over and over again. Now that Candide is very, very rich, he's going to have a different set of problems. Also, although the majority of the suffering has been physical and external up to this point, we have also begun to explore the idea that suffering doesn't just come from without, it also comes from within. One of the big reasons for suffering is complete self-absorption. As we saw on the boat, every single person seems to think that he or she is the most miserable person on earth. Every person doesn't see everyone else's misery, they only see their own misery. And because of that egocentrism, there's no empathy. Really, no character in this book seems to care about any other character, with the exception of Jacques the Anabaptist, who's very dead. Even Candide, who we keep saying is such a sweet, wonderful man, really is pretty selfish and self-absorbed. And when we suffer alone, we suffer worst of all. Eldorado is interesting as a place because it serves not only as the turning point in the middle of the book, but it also has a lot of interesting ideas in and of itself. Eldorado was, of course, a mythic place that was often talked about. The land of gold, where everyone has everything they could possibly want. Over and over throughout this section, there are all kinds of ideas that come from stories of utopia. Sir Thomas More and other stories of utopia were very popular in Voltaire's day. This encapsulates the idea of humanism. It's the idea that if we put a bunch of people together and we took away the things that cause them vice, like money, like political and religious hierarchy, we would be able to create the perfect world. Really, people are naturally good if you just put them together, right? At least that was a popular idea in Voltaire's day. And Eldorado is the perfect place. There's really nothing wrong here. Does Voltaire believe that such a place is possible? Well, he does make it completely inaccessible. After all, if such a place were possible, there's no way it could interact with the rest of the world. Maybe Eldorado, which is literally in this story, is only in it as an example of the mythic aspect of it, that is not really realistic, and to serve as a contrast to the rest of the book. Also, and most importantly, we notice that Candide and Cacambo, who arrive in Eldorado, they find the best of all possible worlds, are not happy there. Even though they've finally found it, they've finally attained it, they aren't satisfied. And so that even in the best of all possible worlds, we wouldn't be happy. And so Voltaire seems to be saying that there's no way we could really create a world, create a society, create an existence where we'd truly be happy. We would still be unsatisfied, still want something else, and still be just the same selfish, miserable people that we are anywhere. What's going to happen to our heroes as they continue in the next section? We will find out when I see you next time. Thanks for watching. You can click up here to watch the previous video in chapters 7 through 12, or you can click down here to watch the next video, which is chapters 19 through 24. Or click down here and you can subscribe. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.